Was inspired by my couch. And I played around with lots of rolling petals, and this guy was trying to, play around with some mums and some advanced style peonies. So we did a practice area in that project as well. So if you guys are ready for that kind of stuff, definitely jump on that. And then definitely this is, a lot of roses here, a little bit of that peony too, a lot of those curly petals. And I only put one in there, guys, right? So if you look at this a little bit closer, you'll see that the centers of these roses, I did them all open style so you can see the actual centers. But the way you close them, right, the way you do them is very, very similar to each one. So I bumped it up, this one a little bit harder at a time. We started off with the smaller, easier ones. Then we slowly got into the bigger ones, and then the bigger ones, and then, of course, this last one, right? So definitely it's a little bit different, a little bit more wet on wet style leaves, bumpy up again for a different style, and pretty whimsical background I did here with a lot of shadow leaves, long slider, grassy kind of leaves, a little bit more like your whimsical kind of style here in the background, just kind of floated away, disappearing in the background. So yeah, these two projects are definitely great for you guys to bump yourselves up again. So I played around with a lot of nice cards. Metallics, they're fun to play with too for the roses. Definitely, hopefully you guys have seen through some of my videos there, and definitely through Flower Series 2. And we played around with some glitter, popping them all up. And then, definitely you can add a lot of different layers, a lot of different styles of petals, trying to make them look a little bit more layered. Like I said, these are a little bit more pointy. These ones are a little bit more smoother, rounder. It's all about the wiggle and the shape of them and how you layer them. How many layers do you go and pull them in, right? So definitely there's room to keep changing these roses up a little bit, depending on, if you want to do them closed totally or open with a little bit of scruffy or something in them. Depending on what colors you want to do, right? Okay, so I'm just looking for my size 12 brush here, and it's pretty standard size, right? You can join me on Zoom, and then if I can see what you guys are doing, put your cameras down to your desks, then I can really help you guys a lot more, see how much pressure you're putting, how you're loading your brush. I can meet with you one-on-one. All you have to do is message me, and we can chat privately and troubleshoot what's going on with your stroke work, wherever you are in your journey. So yeah, definitely let's play around. We can put a little bit of magenta on our plates, a little bit of greens. And definitely warm you guys up a little bit. Let's play around with some loose gradients and some wiggles and slowly bump you up. And like I said, I gave you a little bit of heads up last week on that live I did on you for everybody on my page. And definitely, I can remind you again, go a little slower again for you guys, maybe go a little closer for you guys. And using up some yucky sheets that I've already done the other side of. And I'm starting off with a wet brush. Pros and cons. I really do. Sometimes certain colors I have to go in with a dry brush, especially yellow, apple red. Even thicket sometimes is one of those greens that are just a little bit translucent compared to the sap. Okay, so I'll play with you guys a little bit with those translucent colors as well. And definitely sometimes we just like to do that little bit of a dampness, right, to get the liquid in your brush, just to get you started with a brand new brush. Then when you have your brush in water for a long time, guys, it does settle in here. And you'll see that water keep pooling down and into your brush if you've had your water in the reservoir for too long. So, you'll see Donna sometimes she'll take her cleaner brush and keep it on the side. If you're quick and you're using your brush right away and it's not staying on the table for too long, you don't forget about it, that'll be fine. You want to keep that brush nice and dry as much as possible, not waterlogged. But if you're doing a lot of practice and it's taking you a long time to get to that sink, then definitely I always like to keep it in there because that paint starts to get dry and thick in there. And we definitely don't want our chisels getting affected by it. And that's what happens. It gets stuck down here and then it affects our chisels and spreads everything out really thick. Okay, so hopefully you guys are, reminded, like lean right over so you're picking up that paint a little bit high on the side already. So the more you pick up the first time, the less you have to go back and keep adding and adding, right? So give yourself a good amount of paint, start pushing it down, get to once you get comfortable, you'll definitely get to where you need to go way faster. Right away, I've got to my 3/4 blend, right? Definitely your dark always takes over your light colors. And for roses and layering and doing all these backflips, you definitely need that 3/4 gradient, right? So in the beginning, we just got to learn the basic ones. And then, then you'll start to loosen up and start getting really random. And that's why I made up this little down, down, up, down, down, up. You guys think I'm crazy, but, it's all the things that I had to learn way back in the day through the nail industry that I've never seen anybody in Donna's group do it. But, these are the little things that were my aha moments, right? To get a couple wiggles, maybe smaller, maybe a little bit wider, a little bit smaller, a little bit wider, right? You might need a little bit of floating medium on this dry paper. Right, so I can make up all these random dances all day long, really, right? Like instead of going down, down, up, I'm going small, big, like, really trying to random your shapes and sizes. And you see how I start to get dry? I stop, I back up, go reload my brush, and then I feather in. This is really important for those rolling leaves, is to be comfortable with rolling back in to where you left off. And then carry on again with whatever random dance you're looking for. Okay, so the more you can play around with the randomness, right? Especially sometimes we only need that tiniest amount of medium on the color that's doing most of the work. Okay, so take a look at your brush. Definitely it takes a couple times. I find like once you do a couple strokes, then it gets better and better with every stroke. You almost fight with that first stroke just because your brush isn't totally loaded. And maybe I could go a little tiny bit higher with that brush. But if I'm only pressing 1/4 of the way down, then that's all I need in my brushes to have like more than 1/4 of paint. When you're pressing halfway down, more pressure, right? Then you want to make sure that your paint is higher than the area that you're pressing in. So if I'm doing that real strong pressure, right, I want to really push, get that nice moisture paint up a little higher. So now when I push, the paint is actually loaded more than what I'm actually pushing. Right? So when we're doing all these little daisy strokes, we're just using the chisel. The more we push down to make our daisy bigger, then the paint needs to come from the deeper areas. Right? So this is where I'm finding you guys not loading your paint enough. And then maybe we'll push, 1 or 2 times really good. And then we're doing a bunch of flowers. And then gradually we forget to push so hard. And now we're only loading the last 1/4 of our brush. We've got this dry area that's a little thicker now. And you're trying to do that pressure, but deep inside is old paint. Right? So you guys got to try to be a little bit more consistent on how you're loading your brush, right? Really push when you want to have that pressure, right? Especially when you're pushing hard to get a little bit more of a smoother look. right? When you're doing this kind of look, I'm only pressing, I'm only pressing a quarter of the way down because I'm almost drawing on with my brush. And I'm taking smaller wiggles. You're going to get definitely a lot more individual little streaks as opposed to pushing and scrubbing the floor, right? So when you're really pushing, you know, that's when it's really nice to get those really fast wiggles. And then you can get really tiny little lines in there. And still like a smooth look, but still have movement in your pedal. Okay, breaking down these wiggles some more for you guys. Gonna give you lots of food for thought, because this is what happens too. So we're pushing too hard, and we're trying to back flip. Well, you gotta go from extreme laying down to standing up. You know how hard that is in the morning for us ladies that are over 40? Right? So definitely when we're sitting, it's easier to stand than when we're lying down. Right? So definitely you don't have to push so hard. Right? So down, down, up. Down, down, up. Right? Carry on from where I was. Down, down, up. Right? So I'm not pressing as hard. Right? It's all about different pressures. Right? So then when you start to get that control, again, you can press a little bit, right? But definitely you want to be up a little bit higher on your brush. And then when you get bigger, right, bigger and wider, you'll have room to get up on that chisel and press on it to go backwards. Then you're going to come forward right in front of it and then start your randomness again. Right, depending on you're doing a petal, a leaf, doesn't matter what you're doing. Right? Again, a little bit dry. Need more paint. I'll always try more paint before I add medium. Because if you add more medium than you want, right, really do it dramatic right now. Right? Really try to get it bigger. And then the more you do it and practice, the more you'll be able to tighten up on that back flip and have it a little bit tighter, right? So it's always easier to practice bigger and then slowly tighten yourself up, right? That's large. You got to find some medium ones in there in the middle and then try to get as tiny as you can, right? So you see my gradient here, right? How high it is? That's the reason why this shows up. Okay? If you don't have that gradient high enough, even half and half, right? When you're trying to do, well, I still have lots of paint in my brush, right? You're gotta have it high enough for this white color to come up and nice and bright on the edge too. If it's too dirty white, you're not gonna see that definition as much. Okay, so it's always easier to do this definitely with the light colors on top. Trying to reverse it with your leaves definitely is a little bit harder, right? You really got to side load a little bit more maybe, or really get lots of light color in that brush and just have that tiny little bit of dark. Yeah, this is definitely one that I struggled with. I swear I watched that part of the video at least 200 times, no exaggeration. I threw everything in the closet, got mad at it, and maybe even gave myself a month off because I was so frustrated. And I just really had a hard time with it. And I didn't have a lot of resources to reach out and ask for help back then. And then I just got determined, I'm going to do it. And I just watched that 15-second clip over and over and over. And then, of course, all the things that I've learned through the years and awarenesses that I made and things that I had to play around with to catch that connection. Right? So definitely all of this is in your advancing leaves, poppies, and then I bump you up and play with you more with these rolling leaves in the boot camp 2. Okay, so you guys, when you're ready for the boot camp 2, then definitely give you more. That assignment is huge. So how you guys doing with your backflips? I'd love to see your practice. Share them here in the group, or if you really want more feedback and you want to meet private, on Zoom, then just send me a picture of them in my private messenger, guys. And definitely I'd be happy to see through your pictures what you're doing, and then we could have some sort of heads up of what is it that you're actually doing. Okay, so remember, down, up, down, up. They're very small, right? So try to go small, up and big. Small, up and big. Right? Really try to change that, the shape and sizes of them. If they're a little bit dry, don't worry about it. I want to make sure that you're comfortable with the pressure and the randomness, right? So this is a really nice ribbon effect too, just doing it like that. And then also, you guys that are southpaws here, I have a few of you, right? You definitely have to practice. You gotta get, I depend on my baby finger when I'm doing it in the wrong direction that I feel comfortable with, right? So you gotta get right up there and practice both directions. Down, down, up, you know, small, big, starting from left to right, because when we start to do those leaves, and depending on which way your leaf is going, right, you're going to want to not turn your canvas as much as possible. Everybody has to practice both directions, right? So it's definitely not as easy. Everybody has a hard way, right? And for me, it's obviously on an angle going down, right? So we have to find our easy way, right? So maybe you lefties are a lot of angles going on. You know, because it's always harder. Like, it's okay to kind of go up and down, right? You can start from left to right, or you can start from right to left, but you'll always have that little bit of an angle on your hard side, right? Depending on which way you start. But hopefully you guys are pushing yourself to start from left to right, because, you know, we do write and read that way. So even if you're lefty or righty, you know, hopefully that top one is easy enough for you to get straight. It's when we get to the side, right? This is what I call my right-handed, you know, direction, and then my left-handed direction. All right? So don't move your paper and really push yourselves to go in both directions. Like I said, I may go over one side more than the other. I might be not as happy. Definitely, there's always going to be one side that I might go over twice more than the other, right? Just because it's just not easy. And then when you get to the ones that are upside down, again, I find the left-handed version of mine easier than coming upside down and doing the right side version to get up and up on that chisel and curl under. All right, so try it more upside down, you guys that are left-handed. I bet you're going to find this one a little bit easier than this one. It's just because of the angle and how much can we really turn our hands to switch all the way around. All right? I'm trying to give everybody, I know I have some newbies here too, so I'm trying to give you guys some food for thought too on, you know, things that you should push yourself on. And definitely, hopefully you got at least the first 5 courses under your belt, you know, and then definitely a lot of this will all make sense. Right? And then when you jump into my rose class, definitely I show you the breakdown. Alright, so all roses usually will be like you figure out your size. Okay, this is my 12. I know that my petals are going to be there. But see how much of my circle that is here? Right? So depending on how big you want to make that rose, so if I make that center about the same size as the space I left, right? So I have that is going to be my center of my rose. And then I've got my petals coming out. And you get, most of the time we're doing like 6 in these roses. right? So again, if you even want to just pencil yourself out something, that's 4. So I can make these a little bit smaller, right? Depending on which way you want your rose to tip. You know, there's lots of variations, right? But what I'm trying to get at is if you want to get bigger, then your next petal has to be bigger than this petal, right? So when you're trying to find that shape of your rose, okay, so you see how these petals have to be bigger than the second row, and then coming in smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So it just depends on how many layers you want to do with your rose. Right, I showed you guys in the course, right? It's just, and the space between them gets bigger and bigger, right? So you're gonna spread out, and you're also gonna make things a lot bigger. I got paint all over my white pencil now. Okay, so once we start to feel comfortable with the way that the roses are all layering on top of each other, right, you can start to get that feel. And then again, randomness, right? Right, so you can press and put little smoother areas, pop on your chisel, and put a couple curls in there, right? So, you know, it's being able to transform yourself from when you are doing, you know, this kind of stroke, and then pushing yourself back up to this kind of stroke, right? And then, you know, so you're having that, all those varieties in one petal. Shell strokes in that area, your pivot points are going to be way over wide, right? You have to kind of come up, pull around, and then come around. So look how much space I have in there, right? Then you're going to come around and make them a little bit smaller, right? I don't have to rock back all the time, but I definitely want to show you guys the size difference, right? So you're going from large to medium, and then you can go small, right? So you definitely have to get comfortable with the amount of how big these petals are as they keep moving in, right? And then we can finally make our little rose center. And follow, if I want to follow my right, up and down, and then around. I can move your cards slightly, but I definitely want to try and push you guys that are ready for it to try and get these done in different directions. Okay, so I have a really big space here, so I can actually choose to let's see, we'll pop this up, pop it back and around, and then a couple little wiggles. Right, so you don't have to, oops, I made a mess of my petal here. Not a big deal, just gotta fix that. Can't really erase that, but maybe I'll get creative and put a leaf there. Get my nails in the way. Okay, again, up on that chisel, roll around, and then you're going to just slightly overlap your last one. This is just like a big circle, but definitely starting at the top and working your way out and down. Right? Now we can tighten up this little circle, right? So we're in the second row. You always go higher before you roll the petal, yes. Looks like tiny highlights. Yes, and also tipping with your brush too, guys. Sometimes, like I'm keep loading myself into a pile of white paint here, so I'm always grabbing fresh paint, side loading that way, ended up that way. But if you're too far away from your white, definitely I'll go and blend my brush. I get that dirty white, and then I go and tip to pick up fresh white. Right, and that'll definitely give you a little bit brighter edge. Right, so again, now we're coming a little bit smaller. Right, and then also I could have moved down a little bit lower as well. So the tighter you make those layers, the less space you're going to have in between. Right, so if we move that down just a little bit lower, right, pull around and under. Usually they're nice to be more higher than lower, right? I usually start off with trying to get that little rock back end, and then I finish with a traditional shell. And a little bit smaller, get that rock back in there, and then you have room to kind of finish that shell. And maybe went and brought that up just a little bit higher. Look how much bigger this one is on this side. It's okay. Because what's going to happen now is the flower is going to start tilting. The center is going to start tilting. Right. And then I can always grab a little bit of this tail here too, right? And just keep going. Just keep playing around with that center. Right, this is a real curly one, guys. Okay. Then again, how curly do we want to make our tighter centers? Definitely you don't want to be going too curly in that center, because it just gets all distorted sometimes and you don't even know that it's the center. And that's sometimes what we do when we're making our carnations, right? It just ends up so frilly and layered so much. Okay, so now I would turn this a little bit, because now I have my main direction. I want it to have the focus of my center. Okay. So when I start creating that center part, this is the main part that you're doing, just if you want to do like a little tiny bit of a rosebud, right? So you got your center, you can pull in some sides and some sides, right? So this is that little area that you put that same part of the rose in the very center. The more I use my brush, it's starting to get dry. I gotta really make sure I push down. Okay, so this is where sometimes I'll do a little bit of a side scoop in. Right, so we're predicting the two bigger little ones that you're putting here and here. This is the outer one, so we're still building up those layers. Okay, again, you're up on a little bit of an angle, and you're trying to do this stroke a little bit more like a big comma stroke. All right, so it's a little bit more on the side and scoop down straight, so you can see how I'm building my little cup for my rose. Okay, and then this is where we're starting to put all those closures back in. Okay, so you can layer this in another row, but definitely we're starting to change things a little bit more once we get into this little area here. Right, so now we really want to try and do these strokes a little bit more upside down. We don't have to do them as traditional shell strokes, right? This is my fancy dolphin nose. Right, just sliding that in there sideways. And we can always make another row back here too. The more smaller you make those rosebuds, the daintier and you know, how many more layers can you go, the more daintier that closure is, right? And I love grabbing the end of the back petal, bringing it all the way down. Can even do a little bit of a curl right there, and then bringing it into the side of the inner part of the rose. Okay, so we still have a tail over here, we still have a tail over here, we have a tail over here. So wherever those little tails are, those are great spots to grab or connect more together, right? Especially when we're starting to get really tight in this area here. Okay. So again, I like to, now we're starting to get those little closures now. So we can come up and scoop one in front. I still got all this room here. And sometimes you'll see me fill this all in just so that it's all dark. It definitely makes it easier if your gradient is off, if you have this all filled in with your same base core color. Okay. So you see how I have the tail here, right? So this is one petal coming around. I can come up just behind it, press again, and then pull in another little dolphin nose. And then again, see I have still room for two more tails here. Right, so you really want to get curly in the front here, right? It's very, very straight. Very, very straight. So you're just rocking back and forth, almost like a ribbon. Sometimes I like to start in front of it. Sometimes I like to start behind it. It just depends on your room, what you've got left over. Right? So, or you can just go right and grab that tail and keep adding to it. Rocking, rocking, rocking. Pull up on that back part of your brush to get that little tail wisp out. So this has to come right up out of the way. All right, so that's a quick little curly rose for you there. Okay, so you see how I just kind of didn't put a lot of pressure. It wasn't really going anywhere. It's just right straight up on your chisel. You're sliding and moving over at the same time. You know, you gotta flatten that brush out a little bit. Get up on that chisel. You're sliding down as you come over and flip over to get that rock back on the other side. So definitely try it bigger, right? You're definitely gonna try it bigger. And then slowly you're going to keep practicing to tighten that up with less pressure, right? So that you can really get them a little bit tighter. Now see, I got you guys so close that I'm going to lose you. Does that kind of give you something to play with? Those ribbons go really long. Press up on the chisel. You see how big that is? Press right up on that chisel. Press over on that chisel. So you're flipping over back and forth, back and forth. But now you're tightening things right up. Alright, so I got a little bit more moisture in my brush now. It's nice and slide. Here it was dragging because my brush was a little bit dry. And then we want to put another little one in there. Let me put another little one in there. All right, but you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller as you get in there. Does that help with proportions, guys? You guys practicing with me today? Yeah? I wasn't even making a plan, but could be a card. Alright, so I always say warm up on some paper first, then come and do some strokes on whatever you want to keep nice. Alright, warm up a little bit. Make sure that you got your brush blending properly for you, and then start getting on to the project that you want to paint. You want to do a card, or you're working on one of my canvas projects. Right. Oh, or can we put a little rosebud? Right, a little bit random, but not very strong up and down wiggles. Right, not a lot of pressure. Right, so wet on wet, sometimes I get that streakiness going on. I'll go over it again. Pop in a little bit of a center. Okay, kind of just showing you guys that center area again. Right, so on the sides you have your bigger dolphin nose, thumb stroke, and you're right off onto the side of it. Right, you're not even on it. You come in and underneath it. Almost like my teacup rose. Right. Then you can get up on top of it and add those little closures in there. Right. Come up, grab that little bit of a side. Make some smaller, some bigger, you know, like I wanted to make that one shorter so I can bring this one a little bit more in front. A little extra little closure in there, but you see how his face is in there? Right, because I was trying to stay away. Again, sometimes I'll just cheat, guys, just fill that in. Right, maybe you're going to put a little bit of a calyx in there through it, and if there's an area you don't like, that would be definitely where I would choose to put that little calyx in there. Right, so being comfortable with your smaller roses, then you can start putting this little area in the center of your layered flowers that are very similar to poppies. I got two people that I'm helping with their level 1 right now. And Donna makes you do all the thicket in this. So it's definitely for a reason. She wants to challenge you guys. Okay. So you can pick anything. You can pick a yellow. You can pick, you know, your citrus. You can pick white. You know, you can pick any other light color to go with your thicket. Okay. So if you notice, I wiped it on the towel, and then I even went and squished it again to make sure, because if I see any water drops on my fingers at all, then I know that my brush is still pretty wet. So I don't want to see any moisture on my fingers. I want to get that brush nice and squished. Right. And then what we're playing around with in the level 1, I try to multitask, helping all of you. And you guys are sending me questions and things of your practice. Then I can come on live and go, hey, no, because a lot of you might have the same question. Okay, so again, I'm trying to do my gradient on the dark. Right? So I push that light right up there. You guys are playing around with doing some of that shading with the one color with some floating medium. It's the same thing. You've got to push on that back part of the brush to shove that dark all the way up there. Right? So then when you're starting to do those heart-shaped leaves, right? It's like, why? You got to really over-direct. right? So you get starting off with that shell strokes, right? You can go random, you can go smooth, you can curl back, right? And close that shell. But I need more pressure. Look how much away I am from my line, right? Press a little bit harder, get up on that chisel, trying to follow my line, right? Gotta really get that light up there so that you see the rocks, right? I didn't do a very good job there. Gotta make it bigger. Right, so you get a real heart shape. Then from this pivot point, these are the shell strokes that have a pivot point, right? You gotta keep coming back. Got a little bit of dryness going on here. Gotta keep coming back to that same pivot point. Right, so it's more like a fancy teardrop. But you can definitely spread them out a bit, right? Make them a little bit bigger, right? And then you're not coming to close like your shell stroke. So this second last stroke that you would do, this is where you're carrying on to pull out like a one-stroke leaf. Okay. So you're coming around and then push in and out, randomly bumpy on the way out. Round in a heart shape, and always curl back, pull that forward, right? Then press, spin your brush down to a point. So I just rolled that in my hand. And so this is definitely a lot more fancier than we were playing with in level 1, but getting you ready for level 2. Okay, so again, sometimes it's easy to do them down, sometimes it's easy to do them sideways, sometimes you have to flip things around to do them that way. Some people can do them better facing up, but when you start playing around with all your bouquets, remember your leaves are going to be all in different directions. So definitely try to make them in all different directions. Oops. Yeah, a lot of fun. It bumps you up, lots of different centers slowly, and then definitely I'm bumping you right up quickly here. But I know you have that full program to go back and watch. Okay? So definitely want to play with you guys a little bit more. But you see how much more I gotta get that light in there if you are going to do with the dark on the outside. Again, just the traditional shell stroke movement. And then pushing out to your one-stroke leaf. Right, so a couple of you I've seen you doing your one-stroke leaves, right? So when we're doing sunflowers, it's very flat start, and then you're turning to a point. Right, so back in the day, that's the way Donna used to make all her leaves. But now it's angle to angle, or she calls it a slanted T. Okay, so you're going to come on that angle, press down, and point towards the T. So you have a little bit more of a starter point. See how it's a little softer than that flat start? It's good to practice those because especially when you get to your sunflowers, you definitely want to be comfortable with that flat start. Right? But then you definitely want to, and you also want to make sure you have that round a little bit. So what I'm seeing is you guys are pushing a little bit too straight. Alright, so you guys that are just on your one-stroke leaves. So when you push a little bit more, see the hump? And then pull up on your chisel. You see that little bit of a round? Makes things look a little bit interesting. So now we were watching the top part. So what's happening here is I have a flat bottom. I have the hump on the top, but no hump on the bottom. So I gotta go over that again and then really make sure you're bumping that brush down flat and then to your point. So you see how I have a nice little hump on both sides now? Is there an easy way to do flipped leaves? Yeah, definitely. You know, I play around with a couple of different ways to cheat. Right? Definitely doing them with the dark on the outside is not as easy. Like if you're just doing like your random flipped over petal. Okay, so again, I want to put that dark back up here. I'm going to flip this over, get the light on the top. So when you're doing your shell strokes, right, you're going to flip that last petal over, right? It's very much like our rocks that we're doing. Add a little bit of white into my green. Okay, so especially when you're doing the rock back with your leaves, you definitely want to have that nice dirty green, like a darker green here, and then definitely you want to tip. Right, so then when you go to do your green colors, you've got all those values all popping through. Right? And a lot of times you lose that little streak that helps to get that rock back. So this is where I go in, pick up a little bit more paint, and I'll go over it again with another little bit of white paint, and I'll go over this again just to get that nice streak following through. So most of the times if I'm having a hard time with that, then I definitely will go over it twice and tip the second time. All right? So it just gets it in a lot nicer. Right, and then again, with how you finish it, right, you can definitely flip this over and have another little flip on your leaf. Right, when you're doing these little leaves here, sometimes you can even add them in there. Right, so I'm adding that little rock in there. I'd have to do it with the dark. Okay. So you're adding those little extra little flips. Definitely when I'm doing like a full leaf, you can do a little like a slider leaf. Right? You're doing your full leaf up on one side. And just straight leaves like this. It's easier to add flips to them than a really wiggly leaf. Right, so we have our stem coming through. So right here on the side of this leaf, right, I can add a couple of those little flips. Right, you're going to come flush with your leaf. Maybe do it again down lower. Right, so you can add those little curls and lift flips in a smoother leaf, right? It's just easier, right? Once you have all those wiggles, it's so distorted, right? So when you go to try and put that little rock in there, you've got something that's smooth against all those wiggles. It just doesn't look as nice, right? So if I am going to do one of those little flippies, add them in there. So it's just, again, our little comma strokes. Putting them on different directions, up on the chisel, slide a little bit, put another little flip in there, going in the opposite direction. And so this is where I don't want it to be too light on that edge. So then that way I can have the flip looking lighter than the actual edge of it is, right? So you want to add that dark in there. And then in the poppy class, I teach you guys how to cheat. Just do it with one color, right? So definitely, guys, if you haven't seen it all, then you got a lot to still go and check out. Just practicing in my head. Play with your brush with no paint on it. And try to imagining moving and then rocking back and then, you know, how you're dancing with your brush. Rose course is a beauty. Yeah, hey, Dorothy, you're doing great. Miss Dorothy on her level 3. Actually, it's submitted. We're waiting for grading. She's done. She's done. Oversized next for Dorothy. Yeah. All right, so I'm making like a fancy little bit of a shell stroke for that little center. And then I'm adding those flips. Can you guys see that? On both sides. So one side is easier to do it all in one stroke, right? So you're going to go do, usually on the way out, you could flip that way. But you always have to come in and add the other direction. So depending on whether you start on right to left or left to right, right, on the way out is always easier to flip on the way down. And then add that other little flip on the way up. Right? So it's always on the way out that you can do those little extra flips. Right? And that's like the center with different colors. And then I added a bunch of little dots in there. Oops, darker dots. Alright guys, so hopefully you see with my thicket I'm getting pretty good coverage. You know, definitely that's one thing that you have to be aware of, is making sure that you don't just keep putting more paint instead of more medium. And you'll get much, much better coverage. And, or make sure that that brush was, you know, damp but not soaking wet. Alright guys. So that's basically all I did for my jewelry box. You guys saw my jewelry box, right? Sure, I don't get paint all over it. Gotta back up now. Where's my edge? Alright, so that's all I did was, they're almost like pansy styles in a way. But I just kept looking at the picture and trying to do something fairly simple. And then I did one that looks like it's the back. And then I did do my leaves a little bit differently too. So I'll show you guys all that in the course, how I did the leaves. But definitely the roll, right? I want to make sure that you guys are practicing that roll back. Some of it's a rock, some of it's a flip. Right? Then I added a little bit more shading and right, make them pop out a little bit more. And then I'll also give you guys a little bit more tips and tricks on how to do a jewelry box like this if you want during the class. So you guys gotta sign up if you haven't signed up yet. Chalk paint. This is what I use on a lot of the furniture. I just did the redo course with Donna. And I am going to be offering that as well. You learn everything. There's so many different fun faux techniques that we learned through that certification. It was so much fun. All the different leather looks and crackles and gold finishes and right. And then try not to clean your brush too good, guys, because having that little bit of magenta when you add that little tiny bit of magenta into your thicket, that might darken things a little bit too. So if you're having a real hard time getting a little bit more coverage, and you just so happen to have a dirty brush from the color that you had before, heads up on your level 1, that's okay. Right, so then let's throw a quick. Alright, so I just want to add a little bit of a bowl, a little bit of a triangle look to the base underneath, and then pull down. So it's not just like one skinny little stick. Right, so it always makes it a little bit nicer when you have those little bit of. Right, so you lead with the dark, or lead with the light, your dark is following behind. Right, you're always going to get a darker color show up. Right, so we can put one stroke leaf here. Okay, so I almost made a parrot beak. This is another common mistake. I'm glad I did that. We try to get curly with our one-stroke leaves. So this is like a half slider, half parrot beak, right? So we got to come a little bit straighter on that angle. Push a little bit fatter, and then to a point straight. All right. If we want that leaf to come down into a different direction, we point it into a different direction. Then you can come around and add another stem in there. Right, just come in. I'll try to curl that around. But then again, now we have this little connection that doesn't look very nice. Right? So if you try to make this stem just a little bit thicker off the base and then come up skinnier, it looks a little bit more natural on that branch. Right? And sometimes I'll actually slide to make that branch, pull that leaf out a little bit further away. So I can do my branch and my leaf all in one spot. Then I'll come back and just add those veins in there. Okay. Slide that through. And let's do the light on top. It all depends on your background, guys. Sometimes I'll do a leaf that's dark on the outside. Sometimes I'll do it light. And sometimes it just depends on the color of the background. Okay, so I'm just giving myself a little bit of a marker there to see how long do I want to make that leaf. And then because I'm on a stem here, I don't have very much room to give myself that heart shape leaf. This is where we have to make executive decisions, right? So we can, on the top part here, we can just do a standard slow wiggle, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller to the point. Then on this side, we have lots of room to over direct and bring yourself up to that point. Okay, so in the beginning, guys, definitely turn your cards around. It makes it easier, especially when you're trying to do this stroke in a left-handed version that you're not used to, or in a different direction that you're not used to, right? So that we can get right up and over. So we want to over direct this side, right? You can definitely do a little bit of a rock here. You got lots of room when we over direct. Then I'm going to come back and finish that shell. Now I'm coming into a little bit of a rocky one-stroke leaf on the back. Okay, so this is where sometimes we have to make those decisions when we actually attach things to a stem. Right? And then put your little stem in there. So I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit about stem work, even though this card is not really making sense. I really didn't have a plan for it. I'm just kind of more worried about showing you stuff than design aspect here. Okay, so even this hour that we've been together, my paint's starting to get a little bit thick on the top. Sometimes I'll actually grab at the top layer and pull off dirty color, so then that way I can come and tip into fresher paint and white paint. So we can pull a couple one-stroke leaves in here. I'm trying to be creative and hide that dirty spot that I did earlier. Right. And then when you get really comfortable, you ever see Donna do this? This is a really one-stroke leaf. Okay, so she'll slide out, make your stem, press, pop up on the chisel, right? You're getting right up on that chisel, and then you go backwards, put your stem in all in one stroke. So we didn't get very much dark in there. I think that works actually better when we start with the dark on the top. Let's see, where can I put another one of those? I'll pull one up here just to put one. So I'm sliding with my vein, getting the stem in there, pushing, pop up on that chisel. As soon as you're up, you're sliding right through. Maybe not enough moisture on there this time. Right? And she pops up and does it so fast. It's just hilarious to see her. I love when she does those. And we'll try this again over here. So you're sliding to get the stem, push on that one stroke leaf, up at the top, and then slide back. Maybe she turns her brush, this cheat, I don't know. She's so quick at it. Yeah, you keep getting the dark following, or the light following. So you gotta press, and then come back in. But see, when you press, you gotta have really good chisels, guys, on your brush to do that kind of trick. Yeah, you like that? A little bit more time with you guys? Like I said, I try to give you guys lots of food for thought and do little quickie things on my Facebook page. Again, I'm trying to do some promotions to try to get more people like yourselves joining our VIP group. Break things down a little bit more. Prepare you guys for upcoming classes.